morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are joining us from. We are live from Bridgetown, Barbados for the Caribbean Development Bank's annual news conference. I am Camille Taylor, Head of Corporate Communications, and I will be moderating the proceedings. A special welcome to the members of the media joining us online and in person. Now, today we continue our dialogue with the people, communities, and organizations of the region, and our conversation will focus on facilitating resilient prosperity. Our acting president, Mr. Isaac Solomon, will start the discussion by outlining initiatives and partnerships that CDB is undertaking to build resilient prosperity. After that, the Director of Economics, Mr. Ian Durant, will elaborate on present and future requisites for prosperity. His contribution will, of course, include the all-important review of the region's economic performance in 2030 and projections for 2024. Rounding out the field is our Director of Projects, Mrs. Therese Turner-Jones, and she will talk about how the bank's work impacts the people of the region. Once the presentations are completed, members of the media will have an opportunity to pose questions to all three speakers. However, before we get into the Q&A, our speakers will provide the context for our discussions, starting with our acting president, Mr. Solomon.
Thank you very much, Camille. Good morning to all our guests joining us today, both virtually and in person. At CDB, we are privileged to contribute to development. Witnessing the positive impact of our work in Caribbean communities and hearing words like this road or this school has made things better for us is incredibly inspiring. The support and collaboration of our partners and the dedication of our hardworking staff is driving transformation in economies and societies across the region. Yet, we know we must redouble our efforts to continue to deliver in this rapidly changing environment. Even as we speak, the window for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, is narrowing rapidly. Here in the Caribbean, our progress is under threat because of the combined impacts of climate change, geopolitical conflict, threats to food and energy security, and economic shocks. With our common future hanging in the balance, the stakes could not be higher. And it is within this context that CDB continues to highlight the need to build financial, social, environmental, production, and institutional resilience in our borrowing member countries. We know we cannot prevent shocks, so we must build our capacity to withstand them. This requires a bold new action plan for our countries to achieve the SDGs, which were devised to address common global challenges such as poverty, inequality, climate change, environmental degradation, and threats to peace and justice. The SDGs, which serve as a blueprint for attaining and sustaining improved quality of life and better economic opportunities, provide a pathway to achieving resilient prosperity. CDB's responsibility is to accelerate the region's progression to that desired outcome, and this is how we will do so in 2024 and beyond. As we pursue economic recovery and bolster resilience, it's crucial to highlight the pressing climate change challenge we confront. Failure to invest adequately in climate resilient pathways now could lead to escalating climate change impacts and associated costs, already evident in several of CDB's borrowing member countries. This vulnerability today jeopardizes future economic growth, development, and public sector budgets, hindering our ability to adapt to climate change impacts and achieve the SDGs in the years ahead. The influx of climate finance into the Caribbean holds immense importance for the bank. In 2023, efforts continued to address the lack of concessional financing, eligibility criteria, and other barriers hindering investments in climate action. Mobilizing highly concessional climate finance from multilateral funds like the Green Climate Fund and Adaptation Fund, alongside blended finance approaches, remains a top priority. The bank will continue to finance programs, technical assistance, and other initiatives, and drive policy advocacy for critical sectors to build resilience in our borrowing member countries. Our success will hinge on consolidating partnerships and finding new collaborators to mobilize resources for sustainable development. A case in point is our recent designation as a grant agency of the Global Partnership for Education, the largest global fund for education in lower-income countries. The bank has already awarded $5 million in grants to support education projects in Grenada and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In addition, we are accelerating digital transformation in the education sector by facilitating the integration of information and communication technologies in education systems and institutions throughout the region. To build environmental resilience, we will continue support for climate action by capitalizing the Climate Change Project Preparation Fund approved by our board last year. This will assist our borrowing member countries in identifying and preparing climate change response projects, which enable our countries to access more climate financing and achieve better outcomes. In promoting energy security through our accelerated sustainable energy resilience transition framework, which we call ASSERT, we will assist countries in establishing regulatory and governance systems to attract more sustainable energy investment. We will also continue to lead the development of an online monitoring, reporting, and verification system for climate finance. This tool, which is being funded by the Green Climate Fund Readiness and Preparatory Program, will improve tracking, management, and accountability for climate funds. In addition, to foster financial resilience, we will continue to promote economic diversity and sustainable trade. To that end, we will manage the establishment of the BlueCo Caribbean Umbrella Coordination Program, an initiative financed by the Green Climate Fund to support the transition to a low-emission, climate-resilient blue economy across the region. Another important priority is to address the roadblocks and bottlenecks that hinder development progress in our client countries. We must deal with these implementation challenges to unlock the full potential of development investments and fast-track the achievement of the SDGs. This ambitious agenda to accelerate progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, build resilient capacity, and foster resilient prosperity has its share of challenges. No institution on its own can achieve the mammoth task ahead. Consequently, we must intensify our pursuit of partnerships that facilitate improved productivity, knowledge sharing, technology transfer, and the mobilization of finance. In this vein, we have deepened our collaboration with the Inter-American Development Bank and IDB Invest with a new action plan that will focus on multiple areas, including digital transformation, climate adaptation, disaster risk management, and food security. CDB will also continue to support the region's clean energy transition, an imperative for mitigating the effects of climate change and for sustainability. The big news here is SURGE, which stands for Supporting Resilient and Green Energy Initiative for the Caribbean. This is a 58.5 million Canadian dollars umbrella program being financed by the Government of Canada to accelerate the adoption of sustainable energy solutions in the region. Another significant development is our accreditation as a technical partner of the Global Infrastructure Facility, which allow us to access funds and expertise for our borrowing member countries to prepare bankable infrastructure projects. These are just two examples of how the bank will leverage its leadership role in the Caribbean and expand its affiliations with governments, international financial institutions, donors, civil society, and the private sector to enable our borrowing member countries to surmount the barriers to sustainable development. Finally, as we continue our journey together, we reaffirm our commitment to a partnership with the Caribbean people, whom we are privileged to serve. Ultimately, development is about creating the right conditions for you to achieve your full potential, enjoy the highest quality of life, and have a secure future. CDB will continue to drive positive change and make a meaningful difference in your lives. Thank you for your attention. I will now hand the podium over to Mr. Ian Durant, Director of Economics.
Thank you, Isaac, and greetings, everyone. Today, I will present an overview of the region's 2023 economic performance and forecast for 2024. In the process, we will take stock of the region's economic progress and highlight some key present and future requisites for prosperity, considering the risk, challenges, and opportunities that lie ahead. Recently, our borrowing member countries have faced several disruptions to social and economic progress, including the COVID-19 pandemic and consequent deterioration in macroeconomic conditions. Related global trade and supply chain challenges, compounded by Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, resulted in significant international commodity price increases. To bring inflation under control, contractionary monetary policy actions were sustained into 2023, raising interest rates and contributing to a slowdown in global economic activity. The Israel-Palestinian conflict, starting toward the end of 2023, added to the uncertainty. Despite having to navigate this challenging external environment, Caribbean economies continue to rebound from the COVID-19 shock, with an average growth rate of 6.7% in 2023. This, however, is a slowdown from the 11% recorded in 2022, reflecting some return to the historical average following the unprecedented shock caused by the pandemic. By the end of 2023, 11 of our borrowing member countries had overtaken pre-pandemic output levels. Higher oil production in Guyana was a significant driver of average regional growth in 2023. Production increased by 35.2%, influencing growth in the non-energy sectors and contributing to an overall expansion of Guyana's economy of 32.9%. Economic activity in the other commodity exporters, Suriname and Trinidad and Tobago, also expanded, but at a more measured rate, with the energy sector in Trinidad and Tobago recording a slight contraction. As primarily a tourism-dependent region, the ongoing recovery of that industry was also a key driver of the regional economic performance, with service exporting borrowing member countries growing at an average of 2.4%. These economies benefited from robust demand from major source markets, particularly the United States. Mobility and travel essentially returned to normal with the ending of emergency health restrictions in May 2023. Data for the January to September period showed total arrivals reached 99% of pre-COVID levels, bolstered by continued recovery of airlift and the return of festivals and sporting events across the region. The tourism outturn, combined with ongoing private and public construction activity, drove real growth for most borrowing member countries. Unfortunately, Haiti continued to be the exception to the regional performance, as the country grappled with persistent instability and high inflation, which contributed to weak economic performance. Consistent with generally better economic environments, labor market conditions continue to improve across borrowing member countries. Despite positive labor market trends, gender gaps persist, with unemployment among women generally being higher than among men. Furthermore, while there has been some moderation in youth unemployment, it remains elevated compared with other segments of the population. In 2023, inflation and associated risks to food and energy security continue to be a major concern. While inflation rates generally eased across the region, mirroring international trends, lingering high energy and food costs, supply chain issues, and strong consumer demand kept inflation elevated. Currency depreciation was also a contributory factor in one borrowing member country. In response to the persistent price pressures, some borrowing member country governments extended price relief into 2023, easing the burden of higher living costs on poor and vulnerable populations. Governments also contended with elevated borrowing costs amid tight financing conditions. Nevertheless, with the continued strengthening in economic activity, government revenues and overall fiscal outcomes improved. The average regional primary surplus, therefore, increased from 0.5% of GDP in 2022 to 0.8% in 2023. Borrowing member countries with established fiscal sustainability frameworks have already pivoted toward fiscal consolidation, while the others refocus on fiscal or debt sustainability anchors. The region's average debt to GDP ratio continued to trend downward after spiking in 2020 at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2023, growth in nominal GDP was the main contributor to positive debt dynamics, as the nominal value of regional debt continued to build, albeit at a slower pace. Over the course of 2023, debt to GDP fell 4.8 percentage points to 51.8%. Still, in 9 borrowing member countries, debt ratios remain above the 60% threshold. Looking ahead, the Caribbean Development Bank forecasts an average growth rate of 8.6% for its 19 borrowing member countries in 2024, largely attributable to increased oil production in Guyana and the continued expansion of the tourism industry. Excluding Guyana, this growth projection falls to 2.3%, a moderation from the estimated growth of 2.5% in 2023, which aligns with the broader trends of slowing below average global growth and the ongoing normalization of economic conditions in the Caribbean. The projected outlook is susceptible to various downside risks, such as sluggish global growth and persistent high inflation, which have the potential to undermine the expected economic performance. Escalations in existing geopolitical conflicts or the emergence of new ones could disrupt stability, consumer confidence, and investments, critical elements for sustaining economic growth. These events may also trigger supply chain disruptions and rekindle volatility in global commodity prices, necessitating additional monetary tightening that could weaken external travel demand from the region's primary source markets. Additionally, challenges linked to climate change, including natural disasters, pose risk to the region. CDB recognizes that higher and sustained levels of economic growth is needed to achieve greater prosperity for the region's citizens. Raising potential output and building economic resilience over the medium to long term will require reducing high export concentration by raising competitiveness through increased productivity and lower production costs. Among the future requisites for achieving this are: 1, adequate climate resilient social and economic infrastructure; 2, improving the institutional frameworks within which businesses operate, especially through digitalization; 3, the adoption of artificial intelligence; 4, deepening the human resource base and reducing skills gaps; 5, creating the enabling environment for greater penetration of sustainable energy sources to strengthen energy security, but also stabilize and reduce energy costs; and 6, enhancing logistics quality to augment intra-regional trade which can develop regional value chains while reducing import dependence and enhancing food security. In this regard, in 2023, CDB, in partnership with the International Trade Center, assessed select country logistics performance and made recommendations for improving them. Some key recommendations included digitalization of trade and customs processes, investments in modern air and seaport infrastructure, distribution centers, and storage facilities that support efficient movement of goods, modernization of customs, immigration, and tariff rules to facilitate trade and remove barriers, and implementation of information systems with data capture, sharing, and inventory control to create transparency and optimize logistics. CDB is supporting its borrowing member countries in these efforts through various interventions that will be highlighted by my colleague, Director of Projects, Therese Turner-Jones. To accommodate some of the critical spending needed to accelerate development, marginal expansion in the fiscal stance of some borrowing member countries is projected in 2024, but most are expected to maintain positive primary balances, bolstered by continued economic growth. This would allow for continued convergence to fiscal and debt targets as fiscal consolidation efforts to rebuild buffers and resilience to future shocks are expected to continue in 2024, with ongoing initiatives to strengthen tax administration and boost revenue. At this juncture, the focus of fiscal policy is to strike the appropriate balance between securing fiscal sustainability and facilitating growth and development. At the same time, making the necessary investments in pursuit of resilient prosperity will require greater access to adequate and affordable financing to support debt sustainability efforts. In this regard, and as stated by the acting president, the bank will continue to strengthen its partnerships to mobilize resources for sustainable development and support our region in achieving resilient prosperity. I now turn the podium over to the Director of Projects, Therese Turner-Jones. Therese.
Thank you, Ian. Welcome, everyone. Bienvenue à nos partenaires d'Haïti, especially. A lot has already been said about the challenges in the region to close gaps towards sustainable development goals. From the Bahamas in the north to Guyana and Suriname in the south, lie 19 countries that we serve as clients. Our job to transform lives in the region is why we are here. Today, my role is to dive deeper into our work and convey the Caribbean Development Bank's relevance to the people of this region. I will start by recounting 2023 achievements in our client countries, working with other development partners. Last year, CDB approved financing of over $400 million across a variety of sectors. Water, renewable energy, education, and health stand out. Important strategic partners allowed us to leverage our support and knowledge with co-financing. In this regard, and Isaac has mentioned a lot of them, but I'm going to mention them again, Canada, the Inter-American Development Bank, the European Investment Bank, the European Commission, the World Bank, and the United Kingdom, especially through the Caribbean Investment Trust Fund, are our special partners. We provided budgetary support of $125 million to the Bahamas and $43 million to St. Lucia. These loans help to deepen reforms in public financial management while providing liquidity support. And here I want to emphasize what Ian said about balancing fiscal policy. Notably, our total disbursements for projects and technical assistance reach a record $390 million from the existing loan portfolio. Under the bank's flagship poverty reduction program, otherwise known as the Basic Needs Trust Fund, close to 100 projects are under implementation, representing an investment of $30 million. These projects, which focus on the region's poorest communities, demonstrate our commitment to poverty reduction and creating economic opportunities. Here is a powerful example. We opened the Caribbean's first state-of-the-art therapeutic center at the Maxfield Park Children's Home in Jamaica. Now, this center goes beyond providing medical treatment. It offers an holistic approach for victims of child abuse with counseling and intervention guidance, all under one roof. The bank's Youth Economy Project in St. Lucia invests $6 million in young entrepreneurs, aiming to curb unemployment, and you heard the data from Ian, that youth unemployment is higher, and crime. By offering capital and training, this program empowers youth at risk of gang violence and fosters social and economic resilience in the region. It's a win-win, tackling unemployment while promoting citizen security and crime prevention. Three big concerns of Caribbean citizens. Turning now to improving gender equality. In September of last year, we launched the She Trades Caribbean Hub in partnership with the International Trade Center. The hub provides opportunities for women, entrepreneurs, to access markets, networks, and mentoring to grow their businesses. We now have access to more resources for gender-based initiatives through our recent membership enrollment in the 2X Global, a leading international group working to increase capital directed towards women's economic empowerment. Importantly, last year, the bank assumed the chair of the Multilateral Development Bank Working Group on Gender Equality, which allows us to amplify the Caribbean's voice in this international arena. Without a doubt, 2023 was an excellent year for the bank as we move closer to closing the gaps in the region's sustainable development agenda. Looking ahead to 2024, we anticipate greater advances as we address outstanding infrastructure and social and economic priorities. Improving health, education, citizen security, and economic prosperity in the region remains our laser focus. Infrastructure, the focus of the bank's partnership with the United Kingdom in 13 countries, continues to be a major force for our engineering team. Major road network upgrades to enhance connectivity and climate resilience while helping to improve productivity is a priority. Imagine shorter commutes for workers, lower transportation costs for businesses and families, and improved safety for everyone on the road. Two major investments include connecting communities in Belize via the $36 million George Price Highway project, and in Eleuthera, the Bahamas, through the $60 million Glass Window Bridge project. That's a beautiful picture. We anticipate delivering better access to economic activity and safer roads because of these improvements. As you all know, CDB is committed to advancing the region's transition to sustainable energy in the face of climate change. Isaac stressed this, Ian stressed this, I'm stressing it again. Our focus rests on energy security, lowering electricity costs, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and climate-proofing our grids. An exciting development is the planned grid interconnection and renewable energy scaling, which aims to integrate the energy grids across the Eastern Caribbean. The first implementation in the Eastern Caribbean will leverage the development of geothermal energy. We expect this project will improve both access and affordability of electricity. In the business arena, our updated private sector strategy for 2023-2028 demonstrates our commitment to improving the environment for commerce and industry. Thriving private enterprises are pivotal for fostering economic growth and sustainability across this region. Our support includes financial assistance, technical expertise, infrastructure investment, and policy advocacy, all in collaboration with trusted partners such as the Inter-American Development Bank and the European Union. A case in point is the $10.5 million Caribbean Development Bank, European Union Food Security Program to enhance the resilience and sustainability of food systems in the region. Another is the bank's promotion of the blue economy in Barbados and in the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States that Isaac alluded to. On the social agenda, gender-based violence remains a pressing concern across this region. Working with UN Women and local organizations, we are establishing one-stop centers, first of all in St. Lucia and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. These facilities will offer essential services from all agencies in one place and provide a comprehensive response to victims of gender-based violence. We will continue to support our most vulnerable citizens through the Basic Needs Trust Fund program. By the end of 2024, we expect to complete 54 projects impacting education, whether they be new schools or upgrading of schools, and human development and livelihoods enhancement. In a nutshell, upskilling our populations in vulnerable communities, as well as 15 water and sanitation systems and 24 projects improving community access and drainage. In speaking about the most vulnerable, I must touch on our work in Haiti. Ian gave a very elaborate response to the economic conditions in Haiti. Haiti remains a fragile state and requires the bank to pay special attention. In the realm of education, we're actively supporting the government's National Education Plan through the preparation of 2 new projects. Additionally, under ongoing vocational training, efforts are underway to equip 4 technical institutes to provide training to over 700 women to increase their skills to be employable, but also to be self-employed. And the most exciting part of that project is that it's in non-traditional sectors. While CDB is actively trying to mobilize resources where they are needed the most for development, we are aware of the challenges governments face with project implementation. Again, Isaac spoke about this. This year, we are undertaking an extensive investigation to find the root causes of the lack of execution in the region. To build ability in country, we will facilitate hands-on support to improve procurement processes, and we will make use of our upgraded digital systems to reinforce better monitoring and reporting on projects. Now, achieving resilient prosperity in the region will require concerted efforts and unwavering determination. Business as usual is no longer tenable. We will become a more agile organization to accommodate the evolving needs of our clients. Together, we will chart a course towards a future characterized by inclusion, resilience, and of course, prosperity. Thank you very much, and we look forward to the questions.
Thank you very much, colleagues. For the question and answer segment, we are asking members of the media, whether you're with us in person or joining us online, please raise your physical or virtual hand and wait to be acknowledged. If you're online, please unmute and you can turn on your camera and pose your question. Online participants can also drop the questions in the chat and I will ask them on your behalf. The floor is now open. Please go ahead.
Harris from the Guyana Chronicle. Just to follow up on where you left off, you mentioned the bank is doing assessments of individual borrowing states to find out the reasons why there is a delay in the implementation of some projects. Could you at this time provide an update in that, or could you share who are some of the member states that you're looking at in particular?
We're looking at the whole membership to begin with. The investigations just started at the beginning of this year. We don't have any results yet. We will have results, initial results by the middle of the year. But the main issue, as the acting president mentioned and I mentioned, and I think anybody who works in this region knows, is how do we get the resources that all of our partners and the CDB are helping to put into investments in the region? How do we get those resources dispersed quicker? How do we get those projects done more quickly? And so we're really looking forward to what responses come out of the research, so that we can get the benefits to accrue in country faster, because that's where the value is in our work.
So far,
Just to add some color to what Tara said. So apart from focusing on the projects which are under implementation to ensure that they get to the beneficiaries faster, we also have to take this end to end. And so you can well imagine that if a project is not conceived or implemented at all, that there are no benefits that are going to accrue to the beneficiaries. So we have to look at the whole process of identification, conceptualization, ideation of projects that will ultimately redound to the benefits of the citizens of the region. So that is part of the exercise that we are doing, and it's going to be inclusive in a way that we have not done before, to ensure that we garner the perspective of all stakeholders, other donors, the borrowing member countries, because in a sense, we contribute to the implementation deficit to a degree, because all of us who are pouring money in funds into these countries, we are taxing the same limited resources. But apart from that, there are things that can be done differently. And so we are trying to examine what these things are. The other important point to consider is that we recognize that the implementation deficit is not a homogeneous unit. It doesn't look the same in all countries. And so what we're trying to do is to pick up those nuances in countries and ensure that we come up with customized solutions to address those challenges.
so far, how are member states reacting to this? Are they very responsive?
Therese?
I would say that because it's constantly raised as an issue, they will be responsive to the consultant's request for information, to share data, to try to unpack some of what Isaac just described. So we're looking forward to cooperation of all of our member clients to be able to provide that information so that we can course correct. If there are issues on the CDB side, we will fix those. I mean, sometimes we hear that we take too long to respond to clients. Our processes can be lengthy. We need to use more digital tools to help us get quicker responses from our clients too. So there's a whole range of issues that will be unpacked in the study. I don't want to anticipate what some of the results will be, but we certainly look forward to working on the recommendations. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Therese. Any more questions from the floor? Yes, please, go ahead. And you can indicate who your question is for.
Okay, Shemaine Big Charles, Observer Radio in Antigua and Barbuda. And my question could be answered either by Therese or Mr. Durham. And it has to do with gender gaps being a challenge, as you mentioned, with a large number of women being unemployed. And I believe you mentioned back in September last year, I believe it was, when the CDB hosted a number of women entrepreneurs from the region, right here at its headquarters, when it launched the She Trades Regional Hub. Now, what I'm trying to find out is how many countries have benefited so far from She Trade, if any at all, so far.
Therese?
Okay, how many countries have benefited? I'll have to do a quick calculation in my head. We launched it for all 19 member countries. So whether we had representatives from all 19 at that launch in September, I don't quite remember. We'll have to take a look. But all countries, all women in all of these countries have access to the training and the facility and and we'll be able to benefit from the outreach we're doing with the International Trade Center. So I can give you a specific number later, but just remember it's open to all countries.
Okay, Mr. Dura, I have a question for you. You talked about borrowing member countries facing a lot of disruptions, and you were talking about the Russian invasion, COVID-19, climate change issues, wars and rumors of wars. It seemed to me that things are getting worse on the international stage, which will undoubtedly have a domino effect on small island developing states. Now, based on all these negative developments, at any point has the CDB ever discussed probably reducing its interest rates to borrowing member states?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. To begin with, I think we recognize that if we are going to build resilient economies that can withstand all of the shocks that from year to year present themselves, we're going to have to do a number of things. And I mentioned some of those with respect to the whole notion of growth and how to make sure that growth is resilient and diversification is achieved. But financing is an important part of that, and financing at affordable rates, as you implied, is a critical part of that. What we seek to do is to bring to our countries rates that are as low as possible. So that pretty much involves pooling the collateral of all of our members and going to the market and getting as good rates as we can. So we are cognizant of the need to bring affordable resources to our member countries. And we also have some concessional windows that make resources available to the countries that are most in need.
Okay, I have another question, and it's to the acting president. The government of Antigua and Barbuda and the CDB have just finalized details on the purchase of 3 aircrafts currently owned by the bank that were part of the Liat 1974 limited fleet. While I understand that the bank may not want to go into the nitty-gritty private details about negotiations, and rightfully so, how does the CDB feel about the decision to revamp Liat under a new entity, and how important do you think is such a move to the Caribbean and intra-regional travel?
Thank you for the question. So that's an interesting one. Air transport is critical for our development, and it's part of the whole connectivity ecosystem. As I like to put it, connectivity is very important for our development as a region, given that we are dispersed by water. So it's connectivity in all its dimensions. It's about maritime transport, air transport, digital connectivity. And given the diverse cultural nature of some of our countries, culturally as well. So air transport, all these things, connectivity in general as an ecosystem is very critical for our development going forward. And so air transport is clearly one of those pillars. Any move to address the air transportation moves in the region by anyone is welcome. And so we are encouraged by the amount of private actors who entered the space after COVID as part of the COVID recovery. We can all recall how difficult it was to get from one part of the region to the other. And it was no fun for us to be having a meeting in St. Kitts and traveling from Barbados and had to go through Miami. That is not the ideal scenario we want to have for functioning market and community. The thing about it though, the issue about the sale of the aircraft is really between the administrator and the government. So it's not that we are entering into an agreement with the government of Antigua. It's the administrator who was court appointed, who now has to effect the sale of the assets. We do have a security interest in the planes, and we want to ensure that all processes and procedures are followed in the disposition of those assets.
Thank you very much. I have another question. The CDB committed $1.8 million, I believe it was last year, to support the development of the region's creative industries. The bank board approved the injection into the institution Creative Industries Innovative Fund to encourage job creation, innovation, and that sort of thing. Do you have any idea as to how many countries have already tapped into that fund?
Over to you, Therese. And we can always provide detailed statistical information later, but Therese?
In terms of how many countries, again, it's open for all. Any citizen of all 19 members qualify to access this, the CIF fund, it's called. How many exactly have already done so? Remember, it's not that much money. It's $1 million, or just under $2 million. But I can give you the details on exactly what those projects are and which countries, but we're not really monitoring it by country, we're monitoring it by project in terms of which project looks to have the best benefit for the use of those resources. And so I think that's maybe a better way of looking at it. You know, which part of the creative industries we're fostering, whether it's fashion, whether it's music, whether it's art, whether it's something else. So that's how we assess it. It's not necessarily thinking that, you know, every single country has to be represented in that bucket. Thank you.
Right.
Okay. Will we take another question from the room? Yes, please go ahead.
Good morning, Shannon Munner from the National Broadcasting Corporation in St. Vincent. Mr. Solomon and Mr. Durant, you can answer this question. I know when we spoke in Dubai, we spoke about changing the international financial structure, about lending, especially for sustainable development. And the Caribbean is most open to the effects of climate change. Is the CDB leading the charge, especially with lending not based on your debt ratio? Has the CDB done anything to help and assist countries with borrowing money to assist with their sustainable development projects?
Okay, Isaac, would you like to go first, and then Ian?
I'm not so sure about part of the question, Shanda. Could you repeat it for me?
Okay, what I'm asking is the change of the financial structure with lending money, because a lot of lending institutions lend based on the debt, GDP to debt ratio, so that if you have a lot of debt, they tend not to lend to you because they're, you know, on the fence of if you can repay the money. What I'm asking, and I know the Caribbean Development Bank is a rather small bank compared to most lending institutions, is the Caribbean Development Bank leading that charge with lending monies not so much based on the debt to GDP ratio, so that countries can implement some of their projects in assisting with climate resilience and their sustainable development goals?
Do you want to go?
So, Ian, up first.
Yeah. So if I understand you correctly, you're absolutely correct. Many of our countries are facing the challenge of debt overhang. In other words, many of our countries have debt to GDP ratios above 60%. But of course, that doesn't mean that the development challenges are not there. And of course, they still require resources. So basically, it's a two-pronged sort of approach, in the sense that what we are doing is that we are working with countries to ensure that they try to achieve debt sustainability, maximizing or optimizing on primary balances, inclusive of revenue and containing expenditure, but getting maximum bang for buck from the expenditures, as well as pretty much accessing low-cost resources. But of course, we have to respond to the needs after countries have done all of that fiscal consolidation, you know, and they've determined what resources are required given their development plans and challenges. We try to ensure that we can get resources to them that are appropriately priced and are sufficient. So it is not so much, we don't ignore the debt challenge. The debt challenge has to be solved, but at the same time, development has to occur. And to the extent that those development needs still exist and financing for them is required, we will get resources to our countries.
We have a question online from Anthony Wilson, and he's asking if CDB can explain at what stage is the investigation into Dr. Leon. Acting President?
Okay, so I'll take that. It's from, who said?
This is from Anthony
Oh,
Wilson.
Anthony in Trinidad. Yes. Thanks for the question, Anthony. I can confirm that there is an ongoing internal administrative process involving the president. The bank is extremely focused on preserving the independence, confidentiality, and integrity of the process. And as you can well appreciate, in order for us to maintain the integrity and confidentiality of the process, we are unable to provide any further details at this time.
Thank you very much. Do we have another question from the floor? Please.
Naomi from the Guyana Chronicle once again. I'd like to shift the attention to climate financing. So last year we would have had COP28, and particularly for Guyana, we have a lot of focus on the sale of carbon credits and the carbon market. Officials there would have voiced their opinion saying, well, COP completed, but we don't really have much financing for developing countries like Guyana and other small islands. Could we see that being examined with the bank's climate fund?
I'm not so sure about UNECD Bank's climate fund. I could speak to the climate finance issue and COP. So indeed, there were some positive developments coming out of COP28. One of which was the operationalization of the loss and damage fund, which really is the vehicle for addressing loss and damage in developing countries. And the encouraging thing about it was that at COP, you had countries who were out the gates very early, pledging commitments to this fund. I think at the start we were able to raise $700 million. At the very start, which was very encouraging. The thing about it is that the need for loss and damage, that is a tiny fraction of what is required. In fact, there are estimates that range from 290 billion to 580 billion in terms of the extent of the loss and damage globally. And a part of the problem is that this initial amount that was mobilized is going to go towards the secretariat, that is the fund that is going to be hosted at the World Bank. So what is really required is for other countries to state those commitments to the fund now, because as you could well imagine, the climate crisis is urgent for all of us on the front line. There are concerns, though, with the loss and damage fund in that many persons, many climate experts are wondering if the pledges that are coming from the developed world, if those are funds that are repurposed from other humanitarian areas, or whether these were funds previously pledged as mitigation and adaptation funds that are now relabeled as loss and damage funds. So those are things we have to be concerned about. And I think persons are keen to find out exactly how the LMD fund is going to operate, because we do have examples, let's say the GCF, for example, which is the largest global climate fund, where the resources are not flowing to the places where those resources are needed. I describe it as a market failure. And so it is hoped that the lessons from the GCF would be brought to bear on the operationalization of the loss and damage fund to ensure that the funds get to the region. Of course, the loss and damage fund is critical for us in this region because we live that every day, where we're seeing losses, land losses, loss of ecosystems, biodiversity. It's right before our very eyes. So the operationalization of that fund and the channeling of resources to countries where they're most needed is very critical for us. That said, though, the calls for the reform of the global finance architecture still out there. And we have been advocating for that. The Prime Minister Mia Mottley has been a champion for that under the Bridgetown Initiative. Those are all in sync with the global calls for reforming the global finance architecture, because we recognize, as I said, there is a market failure where the funds that are available, though they're not enough, are still not getting to the places where they should go to.
Thank you.
We'd like to take another question from our online journalist, Jules Vasquez. And if you're having any go ahead, please.
I hope you can hear me. Good morning from Belize. I'd like to ask about the economic growth that you forecasted for the region. You showed that tourism had rebounded across the region by an average by 99%. However, economic growth, if you take out the outlier, it was across the region forecasted at 2.5%. Will that be more or less where it stays as we proceed, since the tourism sector is the main engine of growth and we are almost universally back at pre-COVID levels? So do you see it leveling out at 2.5 going forward?
Question. So yeah, what we are working with as far as our forecasts are concerned is really a reversion to the sort of historical average after the recovery that has been observed over the last 2 years. So we are assuming that there is a return to the average, but I think you're implying that that is not sufficient, and we agree with that position, and this is why we have been sort of advocating for the necessary reforms and investments that would lift the level of growth. Of course, I mentioned some of these during my presentation. I talked about the whole notion of upgrading infrastructure, about upgrading institutions. I mentioned, the adoption of artificial intelligence, and pretty much also improving legislative frameworks, basically to create that ecosystem that can allow for the emergence of high growth firms that can then be internationally competitive and drive growth. So I think your concern, to the extent that I understand it, is appropriate. We recognize that 2.5% is not sufficient to to really drive the sort of improvement in standards of living that we want to see as a development institution. And we are not only advocating, but we're putting our money where our mouths are, and ensuring that those critical investments and institutional improvements that are necessary to lift growth and improve that ecosystem are in place.
Thank you very much, Ian. Peter, would you like to try to pose your question again?
I hope this time I'm able to get through. Given the fact that the president just spoke about the investigation involving the president, and may I ask what investigation, given that's a financial institution, is the investigation financial in nature or otherwise? Can he give an indication as to how soon he expects that investigation to be concluded, and whether or not he sees a role for the president, and I mean the president, Dr. Leon, in the implementation of the projects and programs as outlined by the speakers there today? Thank you.
President Solomon, I think, made it clear earlier that at this point, there won't be any elaboration on the matter. So we are coming very close to being over time, but I would like to offer Gone, a few last minute opportunities for questions. Please go ahead.
David from the Jamaica Observer. So earlier during the initial stages, there was discussion about the Surge project with the government of Canada for about $550 million. Could you speak to how much of these funds have been dispersed, or is it still in a technical stage at the moment?
Yes.
Therese?
Yes, the latter. This work, the Surge, actually, the major launch of this is really going to take place at our annual meetings, and we're in a technical stage of developing the project. So this is a very recent collaboration with Canada. So stay tuned for more on this.
Thank you. Can I continue? Thanks. So, Sir Solomon, the president, spoke earlier about, I believe Sir Solomon spoke about the regional growth, and earlier someone spoke about the outlay when you remove Guyana. And I recall earlier your discussion about the technical projects to get projects faster to implementation. So I think my question, is how does the bank see its role, in that further regional promotion of, I should say development, because there are just different hurdles in the region, not necessarily from a financing standpoint alone, but a technical standpoint as well.
So with regards to the growth in the region, would you like further elaboration from Mr. Durant?
Sure, in terms of, because, the bank, has spoken about providing that kind of technical assistance with technology and other means. So, it's kind of to get to more context about its role in terms of how can it assist in facilitating removing some of these roadblocks or hurdles, basically.
Okay, I think that one we will shoot that one to the acting president. I know the implementation challenges are something that you're very familiar with and feel very strongly about.
Yes, so as we said before, the implementation issues we're facing in the region is an inherent structural problem in the Caribbean. It is nothing new. It has been with us for a very long time. It is just that the way we have approached it in slices, we have not yielded the results. So there are some best practices. There are some things that are happening good in a lot of the countries. What we hope to do is to see where similar conditions and circumstances occur, whether those we could have a cross-pollination of those best practices across the region. But as I said, we're doing it from an inclusive standpoint where now we're getting more perspectives on it, as opposed to just our own lens on what the implementation deficit actually looks like. So it is a problem. But we spoke a lot about three things. We talked about the type of investments that are needed in the region and how we stand ready to support those. We also spoke about our efforts at mobilizing finance, the implementation deficit. If we do not get that right, those two efforts will come to naught. So we have to look at the entire cycle if we are to move the needle and to close the distance to our sustainable development goals in the region.
Question, earlier, I believe Ms. Turner-Jones was the one who spoke about the total disbursement for the the CDB reaching $390 million last year, which was a record. So for 2024, what are your expectations in terms of further disbursements later this year, and in which areas do you expect to see potentially the greatest demand?
David, thanks for that. I mean, the 390, remember, during COVID period, things had waned considerably in terms of how these projects are being implemented. So 390 million will be our target again to exceed that this year. We have a lot of portfolio in development. Roads, we mentioned earlier, we've got ports, we have airports, we've got schools upgrading. We have a lot of projects in the portfolio under execution. So if we can fix some of those implementation issues that have been identified, we can try to get some of this money out of the door a lot faster. But certainly the team is targeting at least meeting that amount of disbursements this year because the needs are so great in our region, because we have to close these gaps, and because there are parts of our population in this region which are being underserved. I mentioned Haiti especially, but we know there are rural communities in Jamaica, in Guyana, in other parts of our region that need serious attention. So it really is up to us to help make this happen, and that's why we're pushing as hard as we can to get these projects up and running. On Haiti, I would like to also mention that we just implemented a mini grid project there to bring electricity to some rural areas that have no electricity. It's a small project, but it's having an impact already on that community. So if we can try to replicate that kind of project in Haiti, for example, in an environment where there's so much uncertainty, I think we're really getting the job done. Thank you.
And this will be the final question because we will be wrapping up shortly, but please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Patrick Sempre. I'm from the Novelis Haiti. My question is for Mr. Solomon. In his speech, you talk about energy security in the region. As we know, it's a challenge for some countries in the region, despite the huge potential for renewable energies. Do you think countries in the region can build their resilience without increasing the development of this energy, or how does CDB plan to help countries to develop their potential?
Thank you. So that's an excellent question. So renewable energy is very critical to sustainable development. We have outlined a couple of initiatives in the energy space where we are already assisting countries. We spoke about our assertives and the components there where we're hoping to have not only companies but individuals move to a space where they can participate in the renewable energy process. We launched recently our minimum regulatory mechanism I can't remember the exact name now, but essentially what we recognize that our movement to renewables is hamstrung by the lack of appropriate regulatory frameworks in the space across the region. It is a bugbear. It is the one thing that could get us to move quickly to renewables and to get our citizens to participate in the way that they ought to and to reap the benefits. After all, the North Star has to be the cost of energy. And we know across the region, the cost of energy is disproportionately high, notwithstanding the amount of natural resources that we have in this renewable energy space. So those two are just two of the initiatives that we are championing now that could help to move the needle in the energy space. I don't know, Therese, if you want to add any color to that.
Yes, no, absolutely. And remember, the couple of reasons motivating the work on renewable energy, right? One is the transition to a green economy and decarbonization. The other is just what Isaac just said, making sure that people in this region can afford electricity and are not constantly having outages. So those are two key objectives. And the reason why energy is so important is because it's a very important cost of doing business. And Ian would put that into his equation to say, why aren't our economies growing faster? And part of it is it's really expensive to do business in the Caribbean. So this is really a priority for us.
But even at the household level, I think we do have pockets of energy poverty in the region. That is folks who do not have access to even the fossil fuel generated energy, and they're still using ancient means of providing energy for themselves. So those are critical areas that we must address if we are to look at the holistic development of our citizens across the region.
Especially in Haiti.
Thank you very much, Isaac and Therese. We are over time at this point. But before we close, let me thank our speakers. Acting President, Mr. Isaac Solomon, Director of Projects, Mrs. Therese Turner-Jones, and the Director of Economics, Mr. Ian Durant. A special thank you to the members of the media who continue to be our valued partners in creating a stronger and more resilient Caribbean. Let's continue to work together for the betterment of the region. I would also like to thank everyone who joined us online and also those who were able to join us in person. Let's continue the conversation on our social media platforms and in other spaces where we engage. God bless the Caribbean. This is the region that we live in, work for, and love. Thank you.